Hello and welcome to Raptors Republic. Cody Wiles and Brendan Stewart here for episode 1 of what's going to be, I don't know, a little series on the 2025 draft. We don't really have a name for it, but we're going to be taking a look at various prospects leading up to the draft itself, just to bring some more draft content to the channel, since the Raptors are very much in the mix of things at the top here. Brendan, how are you doing? How's the great province of British Columbia?
Beautiful. We're for some reason not having a lot of rain right now where I am, which is nice. So been some nice sunny days recently. But yeah, just how's everything going with you, man?
Hey, we're doing all right. There is rain in Toronto, Ontario right now, so it's okay. But we're making do. We're inside and we're talking draft. And today, there's no other place to start, right? You got to start with the Duke prospects. And we can't really start anywhere else except Cooper Flagg. We'll also be talking about Khaman Maluach and Kon Knueppel, who are showing some promising things themselves, might I add. And the whole basis of this series that we're going to be doing is to analyze the prospects themselves, but in the context of them being on the Raptors team moving forward with the pieces they already have. Let's just start with Cooper. I'm sure everybody has already heard about him. If you haven't, I don't know what you're doing.
Like a rock,
I'm sure.
I guess.
I guess so, but hey, just in case anybody hasn't heard about Cooper Flagg, doesn't know what his game is like, can just lay it out. I mean, just lay it out for us, Brendan.
Sure. I mean, you could honestly say any part of the game, and Cooper's probably good at it. I think I'm naturally drawn to all-rounder prospects when it comes to the draft. Anybody who's been following my work on Raptors Republic for the last few years knows that I like guys who can do a lot of things, and Cooper fits that bill perfectly. I think that he's pretty much the front runner, if not the all-out favorite to win the National Player of the Year. He's probably also the front runner for Defensive Player of the Year. Outstanding defender, really great at all defensive metrics, paint him as a positive, elite perimeter defender, fantastic on the interior. You can really just put him anywhere and he's going to be reliable. Amazing offensive player as well. He can handle, he can create his own shot. There were concerns about his shot earlier in the year from shooting from three, but I think he's pretty much quieted any and all of those concerns given his current percentages. And it's really just outstanding all of the things he's good at while also being one of, if not the youngest player in the NCAA. And he's just been dominant and leading Duke to what is likely going to be a top seed in March Madness. And I think really just as a prospect, if you look at the last 20, 25 years, the only guys who you could really argue going first overall in front of him, in my opinion, is going to be LeBron and Wemby. I think he's firmly in that, right below those guys, not generational tier, but very obvious superstar, franchise-changing upside. And I think he's going to make an immediate impact as soon as he's in the NBA.
I mean, yeah, does everything, I think, is the perfect way to put it. And I think, like you mentioned, the biggest concern coming in was that self-creation, that three-point shooting. What was that going to look like? And that's almost been the best part of his game, I think you could argue. He's up to just over 40% off the dribble. And then he's up to nearly 47% from three in conference play. So he's been able to do all of that and more. And when we're looking at him on the Raptors, this would be a fantastic problem to have if Toronto was able to. I mean, it's looking increasingly unlikely and likely as the days go on here of Toronto getting the number 1 overall pick, but it would create a lot of problems. What do you maybe not create a lot of problems, but it would create a lot of conversations and things to figure out alongside Scotty Barnes. I've seen a lot of, maybe there's too much overlap skill there. To me, it's more so when you have two guys, if it would be Scotty Barnes and Cooper Flagg in that front court who can both handle, pass, have the IQ, can defend at the level they can with their length and size. To me, it seems like a match made in heaven. Do you tend to agree on that, or do you think there would be some some problems fit wise.
I think his fit is probably the best in the class. I know a lot of people are looking at like our weakness at big, and we'll get into that with Maluach later. But I think, like in terms of Cooper, you slot him in at the 4, put Scotty at the 3, bump Ingram to the 2, and then you have quickly at 1. I'm assuming, that creates some a little bit of a log jam with like RJ, Jacoby, and Grady. But when you look at that starting 5, now you have Pirtle, Flagg, and Scotty in your front court, and that's just an absolute nightmare for any kind of uh, players on the 3 to the 5. And like Scotty and Flagg can defend the perimeter as well. So you have this absolute wall of which we haven't seen since probably 2019 of absolute defensive monstrosity in your front court. And like looking at the offensive fit as well, I think it's going to be a pretty seamless fit. Toronto's been looking for that first option scorer since Kawhi left, and I think that Cooper very much has that ability. There's like takes I've disagreed with where people have said, oh, he's more of like a number 2, like he's kind of like a Siakam on offense, which I don't agree with at all. I think he's very clearly becoming a top scorer, and you can see that with like how often he gets to the line, the type of shots that he's taking both from mid-range and from 3, and how he's growing in that area as the season's progressed, and just being like his knack for playmaking too, just sliding that in with Scotty, and then you suddenly have pretty much all of your guys, sans maybe Ingram, who are just fantastic playmakers for their positions. And it's just it'll work amazingly in a ball movement offense, which I think is kind of what they're working towards.
Man, if they get Flagged, they would be massive. Like this team would be huge, and it would be crazy. And I mean, like I like how you brought up that in the last 2 decades, you probably only take LeBron and Wemby, and I mean the overall historical numbers like suggest that he's 3rd in freshman BPM to just Zion Williamson and Anthony Davis, 4th in BPM, which is at 15.6, which is ridiculous, by the way, for a younger freshman to be at a 15.6 box plus minus. That would be 4th overall, including Zion, 80, Flagg, and then Sindarius Thornwell making an appearance on that list.
Thornwell, man, that's a deep pull.
That is a deep pull. I'm surprised his BPM was that high, but I guess it checks out. But there really is no precedent for this young of a prospect at 6'9" to have a true shooting percentage north of 60%, to have a usage percentage north of 30% with his shot profile and what he brings defensively. As you can pretty much plug and play him whatever you want defensively. I mean, if we're going to nitpick, this is all nitpicking here. I think he's better off the ball than on the ball. But I mean, I think technique can be improved on the ball, and I think you see that in a lot of freshmen where nobody's defensive technique is really perfect. But I think it would cause a lot of roster building questions. Like there's already RJ Barrett trade rumors. What would a BI, Scotty, and Cooper all look like together? But I mean, to me, it's a good problem to have. No,
I think that's an amazing problem to have. I think every team in the league would be killing to have that problem. The question is if the Raptors can execute down the stretch and maximize their odds of getting Flagg, because I think that should be their biggest concern at the moment. I think people will be happier down the line having Flagg than they would be at, winning some random game in March. So I think that's something that keep the long term in focus, and I think we'll be pretty okay with Flagg's long term fit.
But yeah, like elite processor, I think that's probably the favorite thing of mine is just how quickly he makes decisions. And we see what this Raptors offense wants to do. They want to ping the ball around, make quick decisions. I mean, him getting out and running in the Raptors offense in transition as well, he'd be a monster. Like it would. Oh, yeah, we got to stop dreaming here because I don't know. I'm getting too excited, Brendan. But overall, like it would be a perfect fit. And I know we're just singing the praises of Cooper Flagg, and maybe anything else on Flagg?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, dream fit for me. Like you really can't get much better as a prospect, and if you do, you're getting into that LeBron Wemby territory. Um, and it's just the fit would be amazing. Like you said, amazing processor. I didn't even really touch on his decision making skills, but there's some of the best that like we've seen. Like again, he just turned 18 at the end of December, so he played pretty much a full month and a half of college basketball while being 17 years old and already looked like one of the best players in the nation. So, given the fact that that's where he is already, both as like a player, decision maker, defender, and he's only getting better as the season's gone on, and he's going to be 18 and a half on draft day is unreal. So, I think that's
Yeah,
something I think that's something that everybody should keep in mind, that he's still insanely young and this good already.
it's just ridiculous. And I mean, to think that, I mean, I don't know how much you've looked into the 2026 class, but to think that he was supposed to be in that class, I think that could have been potentially one of the best recruiting classes ever, if not the best recruiting class. However, uh, how that one's shaking out, but yeah, I mean, and he's gotten better throughout the year, Cooper, and it's just there's really nothing to quibble with. Like, is there anything you can be like, just be like, what's going on there? Like, I mean, the shooting form isn't clean, but it's working. And I mean, he has that flared elbow, but
Mhm.
it's working. So there's really nothing else where I can be. And then obviously the on ball defense technique, but that's like, if that's your biggest concerns, I mean, that's nitpicking to me.
Yeah, I think any kind of critique that I would give would also come across as nitpicking. I think we're kind of on the same page with the shot form. I think in general, while his shooting has come around, and like we said, where he's hitting those percentages where you know that his shot's going to translate fairly well, I still think you want to see a bit more volume from him, and like I'm sure that'll naturally come in his rookie year, uh, and yeah, a little bit better on ball technique, but again, like you said, that's kind of nitpicking. So the weaknesses are not very apparent, and any kind of advanced stat you look at will kind of tell you that. Any kind of film you look at will tell you that. And it's just one of those players where you're like, yeah, he can improve a little bit here, he can improve a little bit there, but the product that you're getting pretty much from day one, you're overjoyed. Like his floor is a lot of players' ceilings
Oh,
in the
yeah.
draft. So it's really, what more can you ask for?
All right. Well, we've been singing Cooper's praises, and it probably is the most unlikely pick that we'll talk about in this episode. But and we've been singing his praises, so let's move on to Maluach, where based on our conversations a little bit off air here, I feel like there's going to be some a little bit of more fun conversation, and I think it represents a divide in the Raptors fan base because I think I've seen lots of pro Maluach, I've seen lots of uh, I'm out on him. Um, but I think if the Raps were to land in more to that 5 to 8 range, to me, Malawash is a realistic candidate. Um, I guess I want to hear from you first on your thoughts on Malawash, where you have him on your board, and what do you see from Khaman?
Well, I am admittedly lower on him. I think that that'll be kind of a unpopular slash hot take among Raptors fans, because I know he's pretty well liked for, a lot of valid reasons, like his height, his positional fit on the team. Like we don't really have a young center prospect. Respect to Shamshe, but Malawak is a better prospect and someone who you can probably see sliding into the lineup right away, while Shamshe is still a few years away. So I can see how he's appealing in that sense. I do really like his mobility. I think any kind of 7'2" player that moves like he does is, pretty rare, pretty spectacular from a skill standpoint. I do have some concerns with what he provides on both ends of the ball. I think that his defense is kind of more theoretical at this point. I can see like being a 7'2" player with his long arms, he will naturally be a rim deterrent, but I think that his rim protection instincts kind of leave a lot to be desired. I notice like the one game that I keep going back to is I believe the Notre Dame game that they played, Duke, where there was a sequence where Maluach kept getting switched on the perimeter, and he had to switch on like 3 different guys. But every time he switched, he left another guy open. And that sequence kind of got sent around social media as being like, wow, look at this guy, how he's moving on the perimeter for his size. But when you look at the scheme that he's playing in, you notice that he's making a major defensive mistake every time that he would come out. And so that's a play that's always kind of stuck with me as something where it's like, yeah, he's got. I see the defensive upside, but his processing defensively to me isn't exactly where you'd want it to be given a player like him with his defensive reputation. Offensively, I think he's not really much at this point. He's going to get you points inside the paint, at the rim, within 5 feet. More of a lob threat. I don't see him as much of a passer or shooter at all. He doesn't get to the line very often for a player of his size. That could come with more minutes because he is only averaging about like 20, 21 minutes at Duke. But still, it's a lot to be desired on the offensive end. Even his offensive rating is outstanding. But I think that's partly due to his playing as part of that Duke lineup with Flagg, with Kon, and shooting 69% from the floor overall. But yeah, I think I've kind of dissed him a little bit there. So let me just end on like I see the appeal from a size and mobility standpoint. I do think he's a valid prospect in that sense. I just have a lot of concerns on both defense and offense, where I think in this kind of 5 to 10 range, there are a handful of guys I would rather take. And if we did want someone like him, that I would support maybe trading down, getting another asset, and going about it that way.
For the most part, I see what you're saying, and I for the most part I agree. I think, yeah, there's definitely some rawness to his game for sure. But I guess I'll start with okay. I think in that sense of that the processing and the rawness that you were kind of hinting at on both ends of the floor, I think you can give some grace to him in that department. Super young. He's again another one of these super young guys in the class, and he's that's a big talent jump from the BAL to what he's doing at Duke. And I think defensively, they're asking quite a bit from him. Like the more you dive into the tape, it's like, wow, they're switching 1 through 5 more than you would think, because that team's absolutely massive when you factor in their 1 through 5, and he's switching more than you would think. I think like when it comes to playing drop, there's definitely technique that needs to be picked up, and he'll miss reads. He won't make contact at some points, and so I see where the the processing on defense could pick up, but I think we could see a jump in that potentially. I know getting to the NBA it's another jump in skill level you have to make for them to also catch up to it. But I think once you keep getting him in an NBA system, I think that could be cleaned up. And I don't know this firsthand, but from everything you see, sounds like a great kid, sounds like a hard worker. So I think if you were to bet on the person as well, once you get him in interviews and stuff like that, that could also really help with decision making, especially when it comes to a prospect like this who has lots of things to work on in that regard. There is concerns about, like, it does concern me that he's only averaging a block a game, right?
But
That is concerning to me. But I think when you watch the film, players are just like afraid. Like I think he gives off that, where people just aren't going to shoot at the rim around him. So I think that hurts him a little bit in that regard. But also, I think he's a bit limited vertically. You watch him; he's a much better mover on the court. He's an. You said he's a good mover. He's an absolutely nuts mover.
yeah,
He was measured in at 7'1.5", with a 7'6" wingspan at 250. I believe that was at last year's Nike Hoop Summit, I believe. Or if he was there, that might not be. He was measured at some point last year like that.
Hoop Summit sounds right. Yeah,
Yeah. But yeah, he's not the most explosive athlete vertically, but he can glide around the court, man, like an absolutely nuts mover. Uh, so I think you can, in an NBA system where he just continues to learn. I think there's enough tools there, and especially in this class, like to me, I on my board, I have him. I have him at 6. I have him at 6. I think after that top 5, I think he's in that tier of guys you could consider, um, and that's just on defense. Now, offensively, I also have another. I hear what you're saying about. I don't think he's ever going to be a passer. Like I don't think in the
yeah,
short role he's going to be making decisions like that. That's not his game, and to me, that doesn't really con- concern me to some degree. Like we know what his role is going to be, and it's just of how high do you take that sort of offensive ceiling, right? But he has criminally low usage at Duke right now.
yeah.
16.8%. That's 398th overall amongst high major players. Um, and he's doing what his role, and he's doing it really well. He has the best true shooting percentage amongst freshmen, the 4th best overall at 71.3. That's because he's just catching everything around the rim. Has pretty good touch to me. Uh, he's not dunking everything. He'll have some like nice little touch, like layups around, like little touch, like he won't dunk it fully, but he'll like catch it and then like kind of like drop it in with like nice touch. That was something else I noticed. Um, but yeah, I guess I've been going on here quite a bit and a kind of rebuttal to you. Is there anything that I said that stuck out to you that you don't maybe agree with?
No, I think we're pretty much on the same page with him as like as really good size, really young, a good mover. Where I think we just differ is maybe in terms of what we value in prospects, and like the way I look at it is this guy has admittedly a high ceiling just due to the raw physical measurements plus his mobility. But how likely is it that he gets to that ceiling is another question entirely. I think the concerns I have with his processing kind of on defense plus his limitations offensively is where I have a bit of pause and why I have him a bit lower on my own personal board. Um, so I can understand if they look at him in that 6 to 10 range, and I would get it. But if this is a guy where they maybe like reach for him in the top 5 and let go someone like a VJ Edgecombe or Jacusionis, that's where I would get a bit concerned. Um, and but yeah, I mean, other than that, I think that I'll probably settle on him maybe somewhere in the mid first. I don't know if I have him as a lottery guy just due to my concerns and how likely he is to hit his ceiling. But I can definitely understand the raw appeal of a player like this.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, we all know the connections between Masai Ujiri, Giants of Basketball Africa, and Maluach. Like, I'm sure there's going to be interest there, and like you said, Toronto needs a center. Like, they've needed a bigger body of rim running center like this for a while, and I don't know if we're talking about in the context of the Raptors specifically. They're going to need somebody after Jakob Pertl. Like this Pertl problem, this center position problem is going to be a concern as soon as next year. Like he has a player option after next season, so he'll be turning 31 that year. Maybe he opts out into that, wants to get one last payday before he uh, retires. So like we could see Pirtle off this team as soon as next year. And I think if you get somebody like Khaman, that allows you to potentially trade Pirtle as well next season. And I don't know if you're thinking about defensively, Maluach, Scotty, that would be it cause a lot of havoc. That's a lot of length, and I think there's potential there, especially uh, if he's able to reach sort of a ceiling. But I think he's shown enough floor to me about he's going to be able to impact on offense. I know it's not going to be the highest, uh, like he's not going to be having the ball in his hands a lot, but there's a floor there. And I think he's shown what he can do in a really low usage role and be effective at it. So I think, I mean, yeah, he's for sure an option for the Raptors, I think. So
He's an option.
it will be interesting. It's going to depend where the pick falls. I would be very shocked, like you mentioned, if they're in the top 5 and they take him, then that's where I'll have some concerns because I think there's a tier break at least after those top 5.
I think so. Yeah.
I think that's pretty well considered across the draft community. But I mean, it's also to me in this class, like anywhere from 6 to like, I guess like 11 or 12 for me. Like it's not the strongest compared to that section of picks in years. And I think you could consider him high as 6.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. And I think that we're in agreement that I think the top 5 are guys who have that. I mean, you got Flagg with the franchise upside, and then from like Harper, Ace, Edgecombe, Jacusionis, those guys are all like kind of star upside. And then after that, you're kind of just getting into, I wrote it on Raptors Republic. I kind of said this where it's like, once you hit in that 6 to 10 range, you're kind of going into just, these guys are like maybe good starter territory. I don't really know if there's as much star upside there. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see where all these fall on draft night for sure.
All right, let's move over to the final member of this Duke star freshman trio. Really, like he's been really good in his own right. Kon Knueppel, probably the least likely member of the Toronto Raptors, if I had to guess, out of the 3. But that doesn't mean he's not a good player. I just think, at least to me, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think there would be too much overlap on this Toronto Raptors roster? Actually, wait, hold on. Let's lay out Kon Knueppel's game first. I'm getting ahead of myself here. Let's lay out his game. So, to me, what I value highly, we were talking about what each other value. I love my dribble pass shoot prospects. If you can dribble pass shoot, you're my guy. And especially one that can really shoot like him. He's a phenomenal shooter, almost at 40%. On nearly 6 attempts per game, almost 92% from the free throw line, really another good indicator. And the true shooting, over 62%. That's 5th among freshmen. He's been doing it on low usage. I think that's been the best thing for me is he's not going to need the ball in his hands a lot, but you can scale up. Like he's doing putting up all these numbers, 13.5 points, 2.5 assists on just over 20% usage. That's 235th amongst high major players. So I think he can do it on low usage, but I think you could put the ball in his hands and he could do a little more. Like he can run some pick and roll for you. He's smart with the ball in his hands. He's a smart player. So I think when you're thinking about him offensively, dribble, pass, shoot, can play on the ball, can play off the ball. And when you're thinking in a context of players you want to put around Scotty Barnes, somebody who does that is exactly what you're kind of looking for.
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head with the dribble pass shoot. I think in terms of complementary players in this class, I think that's kind of a reason why he's been ranked so highly, and that he kind of started the season a little bit inconsistently, but then kind of once mid-December rolled around, and since then he's been one of the most consistent players for Duke. And like you said, just having that high level shooting ability, like 40% on 6 attempts and then 90% from the free throw line. This guy's going to be a shooter in the NBA, and I don't think there's any doubt there. I think he's going to be a very effective shooter. But yeah, I think the fact that he does kind of figure out to be just a complementary player is what's limiting him a little bit. He can score at all 3 levels, which is nice. I think that's a big boost for him and doesn't really put him into that role of like, oh, he's just going to sit in the corner and be a corner threat. Yeah, in terms of, I guess like defensively,
that's where the main concern is. That's where the defense and athletically, I think, is where why he's not in close to that top 5, right? Because I mean, athletically, he doesn't win off athleticism. That's for sure. Nope. He's sturdy. He's like built stronger, and he's a bit thicker framed. But it's just going to be, how does that translate in the NBA when you got high level athletes everywhere for the most part? And then, maybe if you want to touch on the defense, because it's mixed bag to say the least.
Yeah, I think I've seen moments from him where he's, held his own. And I think if he can come into the NBA and just hold his own, I think you consider that a win, just because, he's not a great athlete. Yeah. I'd say he's actually a pretty poor athlete. And the lateral quickness is also not great. He can impact the game kind of more just by knowing where to be and being kind of an off-ball guy, maybe a bit better help defender once he kind of learns schemes and systems and where he's supposed to be in the NBA. But I think like he's not going to be locking anybody down. He's not going to be winning any defensive awards, but he has a chance to at least stay on the floor. I think it'll be a bit rough goings maybe to start his career, but he can be somebody who can at least stay on the floor, which is kind of, for a guy who provides what he does on offense from a complementary standpoint. I think if he can just stay on the floor defensively, that's all you can ask for.
Yeah, I mean, at least the college level right now, he's surviving in a really good defense at Duke. Yeah. But that's also because Cooper and Khaman, the other guys we have talked about, are there, but he's at least surviving in the college. It's just, is he going to get picked on in the NBA? I definitely can see a world where that happens. It's just, I think that's for him. What level of defense does he get to? Because he can do so much in offense, and offensively, he would fit what the Raptors want to do. Like, moving the ball around, he can make quick decisions. If ball gets swung to him, he can attack a closeout and make a play off that, whether he's getting her to the rim or he's dishing it off or he's just settling for a 15-footer, whatever it may be. Lots of great things that fit in the Toronto Raptors offense. But if the Raptors were to take someone like Kon Knueppel, it would be interesting, to say the least, when you got players like Jacoby Walter and Grady Dick also on the team. I want to pose this question to you. I know it might be a bit of a hard one, or maybe not. We'll see. It depends how highly you value Kon. But where would you rank Kon next to someone like Jacoby Walter in terms of who do you think could be a better player overall, better fit in the Raptors system? I think maybe Kon shows more juice on offense, but probably Jacoby has more an overall game, especially defensively.
Yeah, and I think that's probably how I would describe it as well. Okay. In terms of where I would rank the two of them as prospects, I had Jacoby. I haven't really settled on where I'm going to have Kon yet. I do think that when I do settle, it'll probably be Jacoby. I had ranked a little bit lower in a weaker draft. So I do think Kon is a bit better as a prospect, just due to the offensive game is, I think, a bit more polished coming in as, like you said, a dribble pass shoot player. And I think the purpose that you're drafting both of those players for as kind of a complementary offensive piece, Kon fulfills that a bit better. Jacoby does have more defensive upside, and I think that's where his appeal comes in. I do think it would be close, and I think if the Raptors did take him, you would have a bit of a logjam there, both with Grady and Jacoby in that system as well. So I think that you
Yeah.
would have to maybe look at moving somebody, or even not taking Kon at all. Maybe if he's the best player at, say, pick 6 or 7, maybe look at trading down and coming away with a few players later in the first rather than just one. But yeah, I think if you bring him in, you would have to maybe look at playing Jacoby more at the 1 off the bench, and seeing what that looks like. Because then you could play Kon and Grady at the 2-3 off the bench, which is probably what would happen in that case. It would be interesting though, because yeah, it's a thing where they've kind of started taking a lot of shooting guards lately, and
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I mean, that's Samson and Trey just talked about it on their latest episode when they also dove into VJ Edgecombe, who, I mean, if we're talking about like getting like a shooting guard or another guard, that's probably it's probably one of the better options, like Kon for sure. But if you're looking at just Kon Knueppel, okay, so if you're team building for the Toronto Raptors, it's obviously what do you want to fit around Scotty Barnes? And in a vacuum, if you're not considering anybody else on the team, Kon Knueppel's a great fit
I agree.
next to Scotty, theoretically, right? And Scotty would be able to make up for what Kon's limitations are on defense to some degree. But yeah, it's just I don't think Kon Knueppel and Grady Dick could be on the floor together. Like I don't think that's possible. Or even maybe Kon and Jacoby could be on the floor together. Maybe. So it would be definitely a lot of conversations and about that, and it also depends where the Raptors are going to pick. Like I have Kon at 8 right now. I hammered out my board before we got into this. I really dug into it again and ironed some things out. So I have him at 8 and Khaman at 6. So I think that's in the Raptors range to me of realistic where the odds say that they're going to land. So it would be interesting to see if they take Kon, because it would create a lot of a logjam, like you said.
Yeah, and I mean, again, at the end of the day, the Raptors are not really in a position to be going fit over talent. So if draft day comes around and they're picking 7th, because I also probably have Kon in that 6 to 9 range right now. And if he's the best player available, let's say Khaman goes 6, and the top 5 goes as we think it's going to go, then Kon might be the best player available. And if you're in that spot, then you got to go best player available and make the fit work out later. It's not one of those things that we can really think about right now. Trade deadline will come around. Maybe you'll get a good deal, and you can work it out that way. But I do think you would have to make some moves in that case.
Well, all right. I think that's a podcast, hey? Episode 1 of whatever we're gonna call this. Where it was fun. I had to start with the Duke guys, right?
You have to.
So have to. It would be a dream if Cooper was able to come in. He has teams just acting up, hey? Like, what was that Orlando game for the Raptors? Any thoughts on that? What was going on there?
Hey, man, I want Cooper Flagg, so I'm in support of it. My heart broke a little bit when Jacoby hit that shot. So, we're and Washington and Utah seem to be pretty shamelessly resting guys as well. So it's going to be a race that we haven't really seen since Wemby, and I think it'll be once we get to the end, it'll start to get a little bit more shameless.
Yeah, I got like desensitized last season when I don't think there was really like any like true tanking going on. Like maybe towards the end, I guess, but the Cooper has these teams acted up, man. So
nobody wanted it. This year, teams want
it. Yes, for sure. And there's quite a bit of them that want it. And Toronto has an important 20 games left, an important 5-game stretch where they got Utah and Washington twice and Philly. But it's like Toronto's like 4 games back of the play-in. So we're talking about these guys, and they could be picking 10, 11, 12. So
worst case scenario.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think that's going to do it for us. We will see who we'll do next. Maybe the Rutgers guys, maybe Kasparis and VJ. I don't know. We'll figure it out. But I think that's going to be it. Anything else for you, Brendan?
No, yeah, I think this draft is really great. I think the top five is full of star talent, and after that, you got a full of guys who could be really good contributors in the NBA, and it's been really fun to follow so far. And yeah, I'm looking forward to covering more guys, like you said, maybe the Rutgers guys next, maybe VJ and KJ, and then we'll just go from there and keep going until the draft.
All right, perfect. Well, that'll be it from us for today. Please like, comment, and subscribe. I should have said that at the top. I did it. That's on me. To support us, we're trying to grow this thing. Lots more draft content coming up. Obviously, you got the Pull Up Trey podcast. You got Can Finish or Get Dunks, Buckets and Tea, Run It Back. Everything else on RR you can find. Cody Wiles, Brendan Stewart. We'll catch you in a couple weeks on some other prospects. Take care.